dialogue about how we're going to use this law. Okay, question back there, yeah. Who is to decide what's premature? Dr. Panzer.
There's no choice. Yeah, everybody has an idea of what life is, but and life ends. I don't have a good answer for what's premature, what's not premature. With hospices, they don't want people to. Yeah, most hospices look at helping people get comfortable and giving them quality of life. Their goal for being on hospice, they don't want their goal on hospice is to die sooner. Their goal on hospice is to have a quality of life. It's not that hospices, I look at hospice as helping people live the best quality of life they can have for whatever time they have left.
I just want to mention that Brittany Maynard, who probably prompted this California law, had a brain tumor and decided not to use hospice because she didn't want to live till the last breath because she was suffering too greatly. She didn't want to be remembered that way. She didn't want to have to go through that. So that is a choice that people make, I guess. David.
As I told you, one of the saddest things I had to tell people was they didn't qualify if they had Alzheimer's or dementia, but they do have alternatives. Going back to the first person that Dr. Kevorkian used his machine on was a woman who had Alzheimer's from Oregon, Janet Atkins. She flew out to Michigan and used his machine and died peacefully. That is prohibited under the law. What is not prohibited, and I worked with many people who voluntarily stopped eating and drinking, which got them into hospice care so that they had the comfort care and they got the mild sedatives so that they were relaxed and not anxious. The rules of hospice have changed somewhat. We used to have failure to thrive, and now failure to thrive is not the standard. It has to be more than that. Failure to thrive could be, I'm going to stop eating and drinking. Therefore, I'm not going to thrive. The test used to be, I think, certain criteria. Can they do their laundry? Can they eat? Can they do, these sort of day-to-day things that you could do, and that was failure to thrive. But if you stopped eating and drinking after a couple days, you had failure to thrive and you could get into hospice. And we did that a lot. So that's an option. The problem with people with Alzheimer's or dementia is that they have to do it so soon when they are still capable of making those decisions and actions. Because I can tell you, I worked with somebody that had, we were talking about voluntarily stop eating and drinking, and it was a week later the person was gone, mentally gone, and so there was nothing I could do to help this person to continue to voluntarily stop eating and drinking, because if we did anything once they went into the inability to think or to act on their own, we were forcing them. So we had to feed them. We had to give them water. You have to do that. And it's sad. But yes, that's your alternative. Unfortunately, it's your alternative. There are certain people who will never qualify to use the law. People with MS, people with Parkinson's. These are things that just will not qualify. And I'm often asked by the media, would I expand it to include those people? There was an attempt in Oregon just this year by a legislator whose dear friend shot himself because he had early stage Alzheimer's and he was not going to go further. He was still cognitive, aware of it, and he shot himself. And so he said, what I want to do is to increase the terminal prognosis from 6 months to 1 year. And I told the senator, I said, Senator, I'm sorry, even a year is not going to be enough. We would have to extend it to 5 to 10 years in order to allow this, and I'm not ready to do that. I am not willing to go that direction yet. As an advocate for the law, with its safeguards and protections, we look for alternatives, and one of those is voluntarily stop eating. Another one is the possibility of getting the person into palliative care where they will get the necessary, you don't have to be terminal to get palliative care. And the 6-month prognosis, by the way, was adopted in Oregon because of hospice. That's the way you were enrolled in hospice, and that was our goal, is to get people into hospice, so we paralleled the 6 months. So these are things that we struggle with, but in the United States, I do not see us in the immediate future going the way of the Netherlands or any of the other countries that allow for it.
May I ask a follow-up,
Can I-
Dave?
Let
Can I
Dr.
make
Dr.
one comment? I know, Faye, you know Dr. Turman, Stanley Turman?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he has an organization called caringadvocates.org and a website. And I know that he's done a lot of, he's local, he lives up in Carlsbad. And he's developed these cards for dementia where you look at the cards, and if I'm ever in this type of state with dementia, you can put food in front of me, but you can't put the food in my mouth for me.
Yeah. Okay, may I comment?
Yeah.
Dementia, of course, is one of the things we most worry about, and we will have a meeting in March on hopefully get medical directors or directors of care centers for memory care centers and Dr. Turman and other people to talk about what would a medical director of a memory unit accept if I have in my directive, which I have, do not treat any infections. Would they ignore it? Would they accept it? Would my advocate have to beat them over the head, or what would happen? Or is Dr. Turman's prescription about do not put food in front of me, would they do that? You know, we don't even know that. He says it's foolproof, but we don't really know. So we're going to try to deal with this in March a little bit. If you have any information about directors of care centers who'd be willing to participate, we'd like to have their names. We suspect they won't even show up, but I also want to say that several times here we've had discussions of the Final Exit Network and what it does. I have to say that I'm a founding member, board member of the Final Exit Network. I actually founded the whole idea when I was head of the National Hemlock Society. It was called Caring Friends at the time. We have literature from the Final Exit Network, which is a national organization, which will work with people who are not, would not be accepted under the death with dignity laws we have here. People with more than 6 months to live and early dementia patients. It's very important. I spoke twice yesterday in Tucson about the Final Exit Network. It is a very good alternative. And comment. Okay, next. Yeah, back there. Here? Yeah. He's not a doctor. He's a lawyer. Forgive me. We're very versatile.
Kaiser Permanente is fully supportive. The Kaiser system allows both their doctors to be prescribing doctors and second opinion doctors. They only have one policy. They prefer to have the second opinion doctor come from outside the Kaiser system, just so that it doesn't look like a conflict of interest.
Protocol
And I understand from a doctor administrator in Portland that they have contacted the Kaiser because they have protocols. In fact, Kaiser in Oregon has a full-time person on staff that fields all of these questions and actually connects the patients to the doctors if the doctor is not willing, if their own doctor is not willing. And so they set it all up and they make sure all the paperwork is done properly. And yes.
So we already have a model here. Why can't that model?
Well, then I want to call on Dr. Mitsuo Tomita back there. He is responsible for putting this program together and most of our other programs. He's a very valuable board member, and he's a retired Kaiser physician. So Mitz, maybe you can tell us what's going on at Kaiser.
Actually, I can't.
You can't. don't bother to make a walk. Get up here.
I'm retired. How do I
Well, I am retired, but I've been in touch with the Kaiser physicians, and the same thing where I understand, not only the physicians, but also the administrators are still trying to figure out kind of how they're going to do this.
Well, that was very helpful.
have them contact Oregon.
Okay.
Okay. Yes.
We were a
Under what
not-for-profit.
auspices was his group working?
Right.
We were formed as a not-for-profit. When I told you the outline,
Right.
we formed as a not-for-profit, and the reason that people contacted us was not that we were authorized under the State Department of Health or any other state agencies. It was because we were doing the outreach, educating the public, and so once the word started getting out that we were facilitating the implementation, more and more people would call us. And when I left, about 95% of all the people who used Oregon's law went through our organization. Because we were the ones with the experience. Yes.
Back there.
So if I,
Oh, I'm sorry, in the very back. I'll get to you in a second.
what's the position of the California Medical Association, and do you know if they're doing any training in medical schools?
CMA stayed neutral on this law,
That's right.
which is a big victory. Are they doing any training in medical schools, George? Do you know?
No, I have no idea what they're doing. We have, because the CMA took a neutral stand, we have been very careful in not trying to agitate so that they wouldn't come out, because there was a couple times during the drafting when they had announced their neutrality and they were going to retract it. And so we had to make some amendments. And one of them was the drug thing, which was just weird. But they had a couple other things, and I'm not at liberty to go into details on those, but they were going to retract their neutrality and go out against it. And so we worked on the amendments, and they worked out okay. And so they maintained their neutrality. So I don't know if they're going to do any training. What happened in Oregon, we only have one medical school in the whole state of Oregon, Oregon Health Sciences University. And they did not teach it in medical school until about 5 or 6 years ago. Now it is part of a program in the medical school about the law. And I did an outreach program at the OMA, the Oregon Medical Association. I would put out flyers to come to meetings, and I would only have about 10, 15 physicians show up, and it was that they didn't want to be associated publicly with it. And because one legislator in Oregon who was in a leadership position, he was a very conservative, said, I want every physician who participate have a black dot in the telephone directory indicating that they're participating. And I said, why don't you just put a bullseye in the forehead? I mean, how ludicrous can you get? I mean, And see, most of these physicians do it quietly because they're in small communities where if the word got out, they would lose patients because the people would be angry and the churches would demonstrate and all of that. So we kept our doctors' names confidential except for those who were willing to go public, like Dr. Peter Rasmussen or Nancy Krumpecker and Peter Grubb, and all of these people that they were wonderful that they would come out and speak unfavorably, but vast majority of them wanted to remain anonymity. Yes.
Thanks to Dr. Tomita, we're setting up our first training for doctors at UCSD in January. So we will have doctors come here to talk to our local doctors.
Dr. Cedar Cruz.
I'm sorry, what did you say? Yeah, yes.
So I teach at UCSD School of Medicine and teach ethics.
Lynette, is that you?
Yeah.
Oh, this is Lynette Cedarquist, who spoke to us a couple of months ago, and who's a palliative care physician, and who publicly stated her support of this law in a legal case. George Will, the conservative columnist, quoted Dr. Cedarquist in his column when he came out in favor of the law. Lynette.
I just wanted to comment that I teach medical ethics at the medical school, and this will be presented at an ethics seminar we'll be doing in January with the medical students.
Yay. Thank you, and thank you for your
There's
support.
somebody down there that's been waiting for a long time.
Oh, Betty Boone, another
On
lawyer.
the issue of 6 months, I'm in on that.
The question was, the Medicare booklet says 6 months or less to live, comma, unless the disease follows its normal course.
Or assuming.
The word is assuming
Not unless.
and you know, with hospice, that's the hospice guideline. But what we do is we look at, there's no way of actually predicting. We have all these guidelines that they give us to go by as to try to predict what less than 6 months is. But we have patients on hospice. We can have patients on hospice for a year, for 2 years. But each time you look at them, you look to see if you anticipate whether they're going to be with us in 6 months or not.
And the new rule, as I understand, is you have to reevaluate that. Before, you didn't have to reevaluate that 6-month assumption. The person was just on there for 6
My
months.
husband was on for almost 2 years, and the people came in every 2 months after the 6 months and went through the routine again
Yep.
Yeah.
and certified him again and again and again.
Yeah,
and
they have to
again.
be recertified every 2 months.
Yep.
After, they're certified initially, 3 months later, and then 3 months later, and then every 2 months after that.
But we talk about 6 months or less in the general jargon about
In the law, we
doctors
do.
finding
Yeah.
6 months or less, but actually,
There's,
There is a-
sometimes it's not a complete great prediction.
yeah, because nobody can predict it.
And what you were talking about with the failure to thrive is the, not failure to thrive, but the, somebody who stopped eating and not,
Huh?
and you felt that they would, and with hospices, what we do is we just figure out what diagnosis to use. We just can't use the failure to thrive diagnosis
Right.
or debility and decline diagnosis. We have to find a diagnosis to use to say why we think the patient won't be living for more than 6 months.
I was going to say in Europe the criteria is unbearable suffering as defined by the patient. It has nothing to do with the duration of the suffering. It is not a time criterion. It's how much suffering the patient has. So they look at us and say 6 months, what's that got to do with anything? Oh, well, wait just a second, Bert. Somebody had a question back
He's
there.
looking over here.
Okay. David?
It sounds like there might be some use for Hemlock San Diego in working with getting together the word and getting it out and having people to man telephones and stuff. I assume you're thinking along this line, Faye?
To put it mildly. You asked me earlier if you could volunteer, what there was to do. This is exactly what we're going to do. We want to, first of all, get the names and addresses, emails, whatever, of every organization in San Diego, maybe the county too, civic organizations, senior organizations, medical organizations, nursing organizations, religious organizations. Then we want to send a letter out to them saying we will talk about this law to your organization, and we will then produce a PowerPoint to make it clear, and also have a handout when we're invited to speak so that we can give the details of this. Because we don't want the situation to be that people don't even know there is a law. Then we want to train doctors, nurses, etc., and make sure that our organization provides the doctors' names, if necessary, for people who want to access the law, and second opinion doctors. This is a monumental task. Personally, I feel very responsible. We have worked 28 years to get a law like this in California. We want people in San Diego County to be able to access this law, but particularly, we want our loyal members who've been members of Hemlock of San Diego to have access to the law if they need it. We don't want to mess around and have people hemming and hawing. We want people to be prepared with doctors that they can access and doctors to know what they need to do. So please, if you can volunteer or give money or both, this is what we need to do, exactly the way George described it, and George will come down here and help with it. And we'll also get some people from Washington State who've had experience. Bert.
One of the problems we have in our community is of the 3,400 plus or minus primary care physicians, there's a reluctance to put anybody on hospice. It's a failure on their part to not save them.
Well, the point, the 3,400
Yeah.
physicians, reluctance to put people on hospice, yes. Yeah, so I guess they'll be reluctant to allow them to use the law, but the law is the law is here, and hospice is here, and I don't know whether we solely can educate doctors in San Diego County, but, and as far as the Medical Association, we haven't seen any step in that direction.
Well, I wanted to make one statement that with recently Medicare has enacted a law where physicians, a lot of physicians are reluctant to even having that conversation about what patients' wishes are. And there was a new, Medicare came out with, they're going to start reimbursing physicians to sit down and have that talk with the patient.
It just passed.
It just passed, and that starts in January. So physicians won't be as hesitant to having that conversation anymore.
We're going to train the physicians on how to talk to the patient about it.
How to talk to the patient about end of life.
Train the physician
Period.
on how to talk to the patient about end of life.
We have a script for them.
They need that education, yeah.
In fact, we've developed scripts for physicians as well, how to talk to your patient. And we've got scripts for patients, how to talk to your doctor. And it's true that in Oregon, what we did in the beginning, the same thing here, the 3,500, 12,000 physicians in the state of Oregon, only about 4,000 of them would be qualified to be oncologists and general practitioners, that type of thing would be qualified to be. The rest of them, I mean, you're going to have a pediatrician. They're not going to do it.
My father and two brothers are dermatologists.
No, the dermatologist. So no, they're not. So we pared it down and we started concentrating. In Oregon, I was able to get a CD. You can get a free CD of all the list of oncologists in the state of Oregon. You can get a CD of all of the GPs in Oregon. You can do that. And so that's when I would send out the notices and volunteer. But you're correct that it's difficult to have physicians recommend their patients to hospice. Not anymore in Oregon. Not anymore. They've shown that that conversation increases the relationship between the patient and physician, not deteriorates. And that's the opposition to this law. Always said what you're going to do is create a barrier between your doctor and your patient because the patient wants it and the doctor's goal is to keep you alive as long as possible and to cure you. Not anymore. That 2x4 was hit up the side of the physicians in the state of Oregon and they woke up. And they said, wait a minute, we have to have this conversation. And we now, and a study was done about the number of minutes and sometimes seconds that physicians think they spend with their patients and the number that the patient thinks they spend with the physician and the actual number widely different. Physicians think they're spending a half an hour, patients 5 minutes, the reality about 10 minutes. But it has changed. And it will change here in California as well, because that is an important conversation.
Years ago as a physician, physicians have, sort of like family members, you don't want to lose somebody, and physicians always felt his death as a failure, and that's part of the, but physicians have changed over time, especially palliative care physicians. And I'm sure Lynette, Dr. Cedarquist, is, with her education with UCSD, is helping with that. And there's a lot of education throughout the county that's going to be going on about palliative medicine, about palliative care, about comfort care through Cal State San Marcos also, and through the state organization of California Coalition of Compassionate Care. There's a local coalition to help educate people, physicians and other people, about making your choices known, what your wishes known, making about how to help people become more comfortable towards the end of life. And this is going on as we speak. More and more education will be going on.
I just want to mention Karen Van Dyke is sitting here. I don't know if these conversations are coming up in the death cafes, but if they do, of course, we hope to be the source of information for
Well,
them.
actually, they are coming up in the death cafes.
Oh, really?
And people are confused. People don't really understand it. They think it's a law that, oh boy, we're home free now. Seriously, I mean, Mitz and I were in a death cafe together not too long ago, and this was the conversation that was going on. And fortunately, I was at the table, and this was at the table, so we were able to tell them, but it's really, really not understood.
That's right. And it's not going to be understood, and even in Oregon, it's not understood
But
still.
I'll offer to the Hemlock Society to go to any doctor's groups and do a death cafe with the doctors.
This is Karen Van Dyke, who brought the death cafes to San Diego and does a wonderful job with them. If you haven't been to one or two or three, you should be definitely going there.
Okay.
Hinting about for San Diego.
Oh, I didn't say that George Amy is now president of the Death with Dignity National Center. And you can say more about that, George.
Yeah, I'm now the president of the board of Death with Dignity National Center, which is an organization that is probably the oldest organization because we are the outgrowth of the Right to Die PAC, the Political Action Committee, that formed here in California, actually as an outgrowth of another organization that was here, because this is where we started to the movement. Basically, was in California, where it failed on the ballot measure, and then it failed in Washington, and so we learned our lesson in California and Washington because both of those bills had an injection clause. And it
That's
permitted,
not why they failed.
well, it's not totally why
We
they
didn't
failed.
have the money is why they
That's
failed.
right, that's one of the reasons, the main reason. But we also did some surveying and found that some of the people voted against it because of the injection. They felt that involuntary euthanasia could occur. And so when we removed that from the Oregon bill and just made it self-determination, self-administration, it passed by that slim margin. Our organization basically promotes, passes, and protects the laws. We were formed to do that exclusively. We weren't formed as Compassionate Choices was formed originally to be the after the law was passed to help facilitate the implementation. It wasn't until they merged with the Hemlock Society, because first of all, we were Compassion in Dying was the first iteration. Hemlock became End of Life Choices when they changed their name. So we took Compassion and Choices and merged them.
It will be a quiz.
And so when Compassionate Choices
No, just tell what you do.
okay, so that's their goal was to help facilitate. Our goal is to promote, to protect, and to pass. You know, so that's what we do. We try to go into states and get the laws passed. We try to protect it in the court system, which we did in the John Ashcroft case. We were able to bring a physician and a pharmacist and 12 patients forward to go all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and protect the law in Oregon. We've also done that in other places to try to do that.
The second part of your question.
Is what else do I do?
What organization?
What organization do I envision here?
You mentioned a local organization.
Yes, I envision, you call it what you want to call it. You can call it the Hemlock Society of Greater San Diego. Or you can call it...
What's the matter with Hemlock Society of San Diego?
Nothing.
Like Lesser San Diego.
Nothing's wrong with that. I'm saying you can call it that, or you can call it the name of the bill, End of Life Options San Diego. Whatever you want to do to set up a not-for-profit
Just get a
organization.
301.
Yeah, get a 50C3.
We are a 501c3.
Yeah,
We are, yeah.
So you're already there, so do it. Yeah.
Yeah, all contributions are tax deductible.
Yeah, part of the next step as far as hospice is concerned, hospice physicians are not, oftentimes, they're not going to be the ones prescribing medication. They'll be supporting the physician, but we'll need to collaborate with other organizations like Hemlock Society or whoever has information to give to patients who might have that interest. Yeah, hospices maybe collaborate to give that information to the patients who want to end it.
Just give a telephone number.
Give them the telephone number, yeah.
Well, we still need doctors though.
When somebody's on hospice, isn't the hospice physician generally kind of like their primary care physician?
Oftentimes here in San Diego, I'd say more than, I think 3/5 of the patients who go on to hospice, their community physician kind of passes the buck or passes the patient over to the hospice
Who's
physician.
going to prescribe the cocktail then?
They're
Exactly.
probably the original physician.
They'd have to have the original physician do that, yeah. And I'm told up in Oregon, the hospice physicians are not usually the ones that prescribe unless they have a practice outside of hospice and they do it in their practice outside of hospice.
The way they do it in Oregon is simply, if the physician is the hospice director or associated with, but they also have a private practice, or they have an affiliation with a hospital or something, they can do it in that capacity, but not in the capacity as their hospice. And that's done regularly.
Part of the problem the hospices have is a few years ago, I don't want to get political, but sometimes there was political movement about death panels and not having death panels.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, hospices were looked at as hospice physicians or hospices were looked at as when you have that conversation about not being aggressive with treatment and just being comfortable, that was looked at as being the death panels.
Yep.
So we don't want that involvement, but it's more being there for the patient, for the family, and support them.
Yeah, well, two things. One is start talking to your doctor now about whether he or she would write a prescription for you under this new law if you met the criteria of terminal illness and mental competence. And you know, we had the same conversation, I can't remember, 20 years ago, when we talked about, would your doctor talk to you about your living will? And people did that with their doctors, and some doctors walked out, slammed the door, and said, I'm not talking to you about that. So that's a good clue. You should start start raising the issue. And if your doctor, thinks that's a disgusting idea, then it's not too late. I mean, it's too early now to look around and find somebody who is more sympathetic. And we would like to know what response you do get. So when we do start a list, which will be confidential, we would like to know who the yeas and nays are so we can refer them to the right people. And I also want to mention that Dr. Panzer said that hospice had all this flack. Everything had flack. You know, in 1976, when the first living will law was introduced in California, people were horrified. Oh my God, the possible abuses that are going to occur. When they had the first durable power of attorney for health care, I'm going to appoint my son, who stands to inherit all my money, as the person who makes the decisions about life or death for me. No, that's never going to work. It's got to be your doctor or the Pope or somebody else who decides.
The Pope.
Yeah. Or somebody. And but gradually over the years we've enhanced personal freedom to make these decisions about our own health care. Even refusal of food and hydration back in 1986, when I was involved, was not permitted in California or any place else until 1990. The Supreme Court said it was okay as part of refusal of treatment. So each time we've made a step up toward increasing liberty and choice at the end of life, there's been opposition and prediction about terrible abuses that are going to occur. And they have not occurred. In fact, what has occurred is much better deaths for people than we had before.
Yeah, one of the things that, speaking about those obstacles, I was speaking in Vermont before they passed their law, and the biggest objection here in California, Oregon, Washington, is nobody in positions of authority are present when the person takes the medication. We want somebody who is a state official or a medical director or somebody present that will oversee this. And of course, the opponents want somebody who's opposed to the law to be present. And so I said, well, who would you get to be present? And this one man stood up in the audience and said, I want a cop, a rabbi, and a priest. And I said, that reminds me. Oops. And he was serious. And so there was a priest sitting in the front row because they had this demonstration. And I said, would you be present? No. So Faye is correct. There has been every step of the way. I've heard the same arguments here in California that I heard 20 years ago in Oregon. The same arguments. We're going to get mama and we're going to make her take this medicine. No matter how much evidence we have to disprove that, they still bring up that specter of fear. And if they can get fear, then, and I have to address it seriously, because what I would say to these people was, I understand your concerns, but we have addressed them, and we have addressed them. Every single one of those concerns. This is not something that we are going to coerce people into doing. In fact, I've always said the evidence is the exact opposite. It's the family members who are saying, Mom, Dad, husband, wife, one more chemo, one more radiation. I hear this special treatment down in Mexico. I want you to live as long as possible. And it's mom and dad and husband and wife that have to say, please let me make this decision. It's my life. I love you dearly, but it's my time. And so that's what really goes on in this, not the other way around. There's no coercion. I've never seen any even, in fact, I've seen it to the point where I had a woman throw the Bible at me and I had to duck because she was so vehemently opposed to that we were helping. I had the medicine in my hand and I was going to put it on the table, and this woman, I just had a funny feeling, and I took the glass and I went like that, and she slapped, trying to spill the whole thing. And unfortunately, she didn't. And her mother said to her, "You must leave the room if you're going to do that, because this is my decision." But I understood it. They wanted to keep her alive. And it's natural.
Yeah, part of it is, as I said before, is hospices will help you have that conversation with your family members. And and help family members cope after the fact, after things happen.
Well, we encourage conversations. We encourage them. Some family members will never, ever accept.
And we encourage hospice too. We just hope that the scenario is not like, oh, you want to use that terrible law? Well, aren't you getting enough care here? Aren't I treating you well? I mean, now I worry what hospice does with people who have a copy of Final Exit on their night table. I mean, really. You talk about that, would you please?
One of the problems we have is, as a provider, or the nurses or the social workers, presently we have to figure out, or you guys might have to help figure out, how to get around the law that if your patient wants to end their life, that it has to be reported, or you have to call Adult Protective Services. You have to report it, and if you don't, then you get into trouble. So how does that law?
Yeah.
How do you bring that law
Yeah.
and this other law, which are two different conflicting
Yeah,
laws?
well, how do you? I don't know. It's very serious. Well, I want to point out that in the back of the room, we have two dedicated volunteers back there who have a variety of resources that we offer our people who come to these meetings. Books, DVDs, a collection of advanced directives, which all have different functions. And they're all available back there for suggested donations of different amounts. And today would be a very good day to join the Hemlock Society of San Diego if you're not a member already, because you get chocolate and pomegranates and a special lesson on how to eat your pomegranate. Anyway, thank you very much. Our next meeting, by the way, is Saturday, December 19th. Jean, thank you for pointing that out. It's Saturday. It's our Right to Die Film Festival, which we do on alternate months. And so we're showing the film Being Mortal, based on the book of the same name by Atoka Wande. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's been showing around the county. It's excellent. Not talking about our particular issue, but talking about unusual treatment at the end of life and how to have a better end. And then in January, the third Sunday, we'll meet here again talking about implementation of the law. And then following that, the following February, Right to Die film series will have the film How to Die in Oregon. We had showed that before, but now that it's a real possibility here in California, not a possibility, it's a real thing here in California, you'll see what's involved, and you'll see what volunteers do, and we want to be able to do that here in San Diego. And then following that in March, we hope to have a meeting about Alzheimer's, dementia. And we hope to have directors of care centers for memory units talk about what would actually work in your advanced directive that would enable you to check out earlier than forever. Okay, thank you very much for coming. Thank you.